conversation this morning is, are Nigerian graduates the products of their tertiary institutions? And we already have our guest sitting live in the studio with us. He is Kenneth Ekenwa. He's a lecturer at the University of Lagos. And you rated yourself 80% when it has to do with adaptability to technology and how you've been able to lecture your students. But we've been seeing a lot of complaints online that some lecturers have not been able to figure all of that out. So in your own opinion, how do you think your colleagues are doing?
Well, like I did say, we're catching up. It's a catching up process. It's a transition. If you've been used to the brick and mortar model for some 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden you have to find yourself locked up in a room and with a computer, it's not going to be easy. But I think because the backbone has been there ab initio for many universities, and they have been experimental phases even before Corona ever came up. So it's a process that I think my colleagues are actually adapting to, and they are also embracing it because it gives a lot of flexibility to. When you look at, for example, the Lagos traffic, it reduces your incidence of having, to get a lot of stress going to work. So you can, from the comfort of wherever you are, attend your conferences, deliver your lectures, and to an extent, it's been seamless. But for us and other colleagues, I think it's still going to take a lot of time, to catch up fully.
All right. So we're discussing the products of tertiary institutions on Tea or Coffee this morning. We're discussing what kind of students the universities in Nigeria produce, in relation or within the context of choice of study, or, when, for instance, a student that's wanted to study law but has been, for instance, given linguistics, or wanted to study computer science but, for instance, has been given a completely different subjects because of things like post-UTME and all these kind of things. So that is the topic of discussion this morning on Tea or Coffee. Now, my question to you is, how well are students a product of their tertiary institutions in Nigeria? What is the role of Nigeria, what is the role of universities? How are universities playing a role into ensuring that, they produce, for lack of a better word, good products, in form of the students that they actually, produce?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I think on the one hand it borders on education,
okay,
but on the other hand it borders on socialization.
Okay.
So it would not be too fair to place the emphasis too much on the universities. We also have other institutions that have a major role to play in determining the kind of products that we produce at the university level after 4 years of education. It begins with the family, it begins with, the society generally. So the products that we're actually having from our universities, I would say, are 60%, inputs from the university and 40% input from the society.
Okay.
So you look at how is the society now. That's an index. And then the society also reflects on the university.
Okay.
Okay. Looking at our society, what emphasis do we actually place on education? What's the premium amount on education? Why am I saying that? If we actually wanted to place the kind of emphasis we ought to be placing on education, you would be funding the universities, you'll be funding education from the primary level to the tertiary level better than you will fund anything. So if we have de-emphasized education, okay, and we've funded other aspects of society, there is a lag. And then that lag has a multiplier effect on society because it's a circle. So in the last 40 years, the educational standard went down and the society standard was a reflection of that. The society, the outcome of society was a reflection of that. So what did we start getting? The kind of crisis we're having now. A good number of the issues that are pointers to the crisis in Nigeria today, you will find out, is as a result of a good segment of the population that have not been properly educated. So rather than emphasizing proper education in Nigeria, we are indirectly funding mal-education in Nigeria. And there is a history, there's a trajectory that has brought us to that level. So, give and take, when most of our colleagues, my colleagues, for instance, go outside the country and they teach and they lecture, they do fantastically well. Again, when some of our students leave Nigeria to go study outside Nigeria, they come out with the best results. You have the best doctors in the United States are Nigerians. Most of them even schooled in some universities in Nigeria before going over, for their postgraduate studies. So how do you resolve such a contradiction? How come a student who in the Nigerian university couldn't perform excellently well, in quotes, goes to the UK, goes to America, and tops his class? So these are fundamental questions, and we need to start by looking at what are we doing in the society wrongly that is transmuted into our educational system and institutions, and that is responsible for the kind of graduates that we're churning out in our country today.
Okay, so I want us to start from the cradle when it has to do with admission systems and how students are being taken into the universities and all of that. So before you joined us on set, I was trying to explain to Ade the whole WAEC process and the cutoff mark for JAM, the cutoff mark for post-UTME, the points and everything. And because I do not work in the university Senate and everything, I may not know the other criterions that they need to get, students admission and all of that. But, at the end of the day, what we just hear is, I made this cutoff, but they didn't pick me. I've been writing JAM for 50 years and they didn't pick me. And I passed my WAEC, I had A's, I had B's. I even passed the post-UTME because I know that every course has a cutoff mark before they actually admit them into the university and all of that. So how does it work, really? What do you have to do as a student to get an admission and whatnot?
Okay, so I did mention the history and the trajectory that has gotten us to where we are. So let me go back, if you permit me to go back into history.
Yes.
Okay, a little under 70 years ago, we didn't have universities in Nigeria. We had one or two colleges, Yaba College of Technology and the University College in Ibadan.
Yes.
And those colleges were set up by the colonial masters, offering courses that, suited colonial purposes. Courses like hotel management, catering, and hospitality or thereabout. So we gained our independence in 1960, and the visionary leadership we had then decided that we needed to have our own homegrown students in universities in Nigeria. So there came the birth of what we call premier universities. Yeah. The birth of the likes of University of Lagos, the birth of the University of Ibadan, Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, Obafemi Awolowo University, then University of Ife in former Osun State, former Western Nigeria, which became Oyo State, which is now Osun State. And it went on and on. Okay, so at that period, how did you need to get into university? The standard of education was quite high then. And all you need to do was, go through the normal system, get your A-levels, and you proceed into university. So sometime in 1978, the population was growing. Nigeria was expanding as a country. We were getting richer. And they felt we needed to have an easier way away from, A-levels for students to get into the few universities we had then. Up into the 70s, we started having second-generation universities like the University of Benin, the University of Ilorin, and, the host of others. So there came the establishment of the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board. So you would write your JAMB, and the standard was still very high. And at that point, within this trajectory, you would, interestingly, we had expatriates, from Europe, from America, that were lecturing in Nigerian universities, in Unilag, in UI, in OU, lecturing here. And after the 70s, we started experiencing economic decline. So some of these expatriates started leaving. Then in 1978, we had JAMB. So we moved forward. In 1986, a government introduced what we call the Structural Adjustment Program. The currency was devalued. People left Nigeria. We, at that point, also had what we call brain drain. Now, from that period on, the standard of education began to decline. We still now had JAMB. The emphasis on A-levels was, played down. They had what you used to call then HSC, Higher Secondary School Certificate, that was placed down or almost phased out. And then people had to write JAMB. And then we introduced something that also contributed to the decline of education in this country, the quota system. So if I was from a particular state in Nigeria. If I had to score, I needed to score, say, over 200 to get admission. But if I was from another state in Nigeria, which were considered as less educationally privileged or, privileged states, if I could score 100, I would go to the same university. So you find somebody that scored about 250 coming from a particular state in this country, and somebody that scored about 150 coming from another state in this country, having to vie for the same position in the same federal universities. So because of where you're coming from, from a less educationally privileged state, you are given that admission benefit. So what now happened? People had to now start resorting to other ways to pass in JAMB. And that, gave birth to so much explosion and escalation of examination malpractices. So we now started having people scoring very high who now qualified to get into universities, got into universities, but who did not actually own the results that they had, on paper. So universities now discovered that somebody's coming here to study medicine, he has scored 340 in JAMB, and he doesn't even know where the abdomen in the human body is. And under the first year of being admitted to study medicine, he goes on probation. He fails all his courses. So sometime in 2005, the universities introduced what you called the post-UME. That, look, you can't keep giving us students from JAMB and they scored 350 and we'll give them admission. Let's have our own way of actually censoring who is fit, to come into university. And the story goes on and on. So when you look at that process, I come to a conclusion. There is a need for us to rejig that process. There's a need for us to reinvent that process. And some universities have gone, ahead to do things in the direction of having a body, an examination body that looks like JAMB. You have one, it's called IJMB, you have JUPEB, so that they can actually be sure of the quality of students that are actually coming into the system. But you see the history I was able to draw from 1962. The damage has been greatly done. And it would take another maybe 30, 15 years, to get back to normal.
From what you have just said, I picked out something that kind of seems a bit unfair. When you talked about the quota system and that's some states that are less privileged when it has to do with education and some states that are highly privileged, and then you have students placed side by side vying from the same opportunity to get admission. Isn't that unfair? Isn't that, and at the end of the day, there are times whereby the students from the less privileged states get admission than the ones that have actually performed very well.
Well, I've learned, living in Nigeria for over 40 years, being born in Nigeria, to live with a mantra. And the mantra is very simple. You can't treat everybody equally. But at least you should try to treat everybody fairly. And I think that the educational system in this country, the process of admission in this country, to an extent, does not maximize the intellectual faculty of those that have the capabilities to get into the university. So much so that even when a very intelligent student scores very high in the existing process, he or she is most likely not to get admitted into the course that he or she, other factors come into play, which I'm not going to mention here. He or she has been intense right from childhood, to study. And that brings us to how people even get to study the courses they get to study. So it's a big problem. So I wouldn't want to comment on the fairness or on the unfairness of the system, but I think that we should move away from mediocrity in our country, in our educational system, and begin to place serious emphasis on merits. People that pass, people that get above the cutoff, people that qualify, not just even with JAMB exams, right? People that, there are many factors that could be responsible for why you may not score as much as you want to score in the JAMB exam. You could have gotten to the exam late. Now we have the CBT, the computer-based test. You might have your system malfunctioning. So we need to overhaul the system of admission in this country and ensure that the best students actually get to study the courses they are intent on studying from the cradle.